We are so excited to be here tonight with author Maryanne Melloan Woods. And I'm especially excited about this because she's had such an interesting career as a writer in a variety of genres and mediums. And so it's super interesting to me that where she's come from. So I'm excited to talk about that and ask your questions. And we have a few things to talk about as well. So welcome, Maryanne. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
And before we get started, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself, where you live, a little bit about who you are and your background?
Okay, I live in New Jersey with my family, and I started my writing journey as a playwright, and then moved to LA and wrote for TV. And then came back to the New York area and have been working in theater again, and then got interested in YA fiction, and more on that in detail later.
Awesome, thank you so much. So I guess well, let's just start there since we're already kind of talking about it. So yeah. Was your plan to be in TV, or what was your career goal that led you to that point in the first place?
I'll tell you, I have the seminal moment. I remember as a teenager watching a TV show about where they were interviewing TV comedy writers who worked in what's called the writer's room. And I thought, that's what I want to do. But, had as a girl from New Jersey make that jump. I was lucky enough to go to a high school that had a playwriting class, and then I went to Drew University, which had a wonderful playwriting program. And then I was near New York, so I got involved in New York theater, and then took a deep breath and made the jump to LA, where I was lucky enough to land Bob Goomer as my agent. He's retired now, so don't bug him. And then I wrote, you have to write what are called spec scripts, which are scripts that you come up with for existing TV shows as a writing sample. And so then Bob sent me around on meetings, and I remember the first time I drove onto a movie studio lot, just thinking, man, I've made it. And then I finally got my first sitcom writing job, which was a TV show called Partners with John Cryer, who was later on 2.5 Men. And it was run by two wonderful writers, Jeff Greenstein and Jeff Strauss. And I just remember when I met the other writers, finally in that writer's room, I felt like I had stumbled upon this magical land where everybody spoke a secret language that I had always known myself. And I was like, oh my gosh, these are my people. And they cared about the same things that I did. And so anyhow, while I was in LA, I learned a lot about both the craft of comedy and writing in general. And it's a wonderful, working in TV is such a wonderful internship. That's not the word I'm looking for, but the people who've been doing it longer pass down the rules to the younger people. And so it's a great way to learn. And yet, I had a great run in LA, but it never quite felt like home. So I moved back to New York, met my husband, and stayed. And as I said, I wanted to work in theater again. I had missed New York theater. But at the time that I moved back and just after, I was hearing a lot about YA fiction. It was just really starting to heat up. And Lazarus, the very first draft of Lazarus was actually a TV pilot that I got a lot of meetings on, but it never got picked up. But there was something about it that I just found compelling, like I wasn't ready to let go of the story. So I dug deep and started reading all the most highly recommended YA fiction that I could to really study the form. And at the time, I found two that were just so much better than all the others. They just were, in my humble opinion. And that was The Hunger Games, maybe you've heard of it, by Suzanne Collins, and The Fault in Our Stars by John Green. And so those books were my school. You know, that was my training. I just really studied the form through those. And then that gave me the courage to start writing Lazarus as a YA novel. So
I love that. I love it. And I remember yours because Hannah and I talked about it a lot, and she said, "This is so good, but it reads like a script." And so I remember you guys going back and forth on it, and the bones were so good and they were there, and you just delivered every time you did a revision. You did such a good job.
Well, she gave great notes, and they were challenging notes, but it was great because it made me really stretch and realize, oh, this is what I need to do to really work in this form. So anyhow, big love fest here at Owl Hollow.
Well, you did amazing, and we were so excited that to watch kind of the development of it from a really great concept to a really great novel. One is one everyone should read. So that's really interesting. I want to interrupt just a second and say, we'd love to hear your questions and comments. So just add them in the comments as we go, and Carrie's watching them, and we'll kind of answer them as we talk here. So don't be afraid, and you don't have to wait till the end. Just if you have questions or comments for Maryanne, throw them in there. So kind of a segue from how you got into novel writing. Can you tell us a little bit about Lazarus and the concept, and what you're excited about for readers to discover there?
Okay, well, I'll tell you the basic story for people who haven't read the description on the website. It's the story of Margot and Hank, who are two teen detectives in this tiny town of Lazarus, Nebraska, and they have a profoundly deep relationship. The only hitch in it is that Hank has been dead for 2 months. And yet, through the power of their bond, Margot is the only one who can still see and hear him. And when a murder happens in their small town, Margot sets out to solve it. And Hank helps her, and she does the everyday detective work, knocking on doors, and he can pop from place to place unseen and spy on people. So that's how they work together. But at the same time, she is also trying to solve the cold case of her mother's murder from 7 years ago. And it gets more and more dangerous for her. And as she sort of finally goes into battle with the person who done it, Hank is helpless to help her, and things get dramatic. And as for where it came from, for this one, I just had this image that just popped into my mind, which was of this teen girl on this sort of bleak, windswept, harvested cornfield, trying to find clues. And I knew she was trying to solve a murder. I knew she had better detective instincts than any of the other adults around her, including her father, who's the police chief. And I knew she loved funky thrift store fashion. And I knew she had this boyfriend she'd been close with, but she had lost him. And when I get ideas like that, little kernels of ideas, I know that if it just keeps coming back and keeps coming back, it's something that I have to write. And so I wrote it for TV once, but then ultimately there was a more appropriate form for it. So that's where it came from.
Did you feel like that switching switching to novel writing, do you think that brought out different things that weren't there in the script version, or do you think it made a better piece, or just different?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And of course, I was learning the form at the same time. But it's a much more intimate form of writing, because script writing is such a collaboration. You know, it's you're working with actors, you're working with a director, you're working with a casting director who is going to show you what that person looks like. But in novel writing, it's just you and the reader, and I just feel like you owe them the deepest, most emotionally felt journey that you can offer. And I had to learn to do a lot more description than I was used to doing in script writing. And yeah, and kind of a funny story. I thought to myself, well, now that I'm going to be a serious book writer, of course I have to write in third person because, you know, that's how you do it. And that did not come to me naturally at all. And then I realized, well, I need to play to my strengths, which is I know how to write monologues. So in a sense, the first person chapters for Margot and Hank are in a way like long monologues, which is something I do know how to do. So
I love that. And
yeah.
love your description. I've never heard it said that way, that it's intimacy. It's just you and the reader. I love that. That's such a cool one.
Yeah, which is what I love about reading. You know, it's just you connecting with the author, you know.
I love that. That's beautiful. I can't see a lot of the comments. I can just see Darby saying editors are so bossy. So
interesting.
we have that God complex, Darby. I don't know, but I think Maryanne was a good student, and it worked out really well with this novel.
It did work out well.
So one of the things, you kind of touched on this a little bit, but you have comments or reviews on your book that talk about how funny it is, and then it's a really sad topic. So how do you balance kind of keeping it light and fun and YA and dealing with these deep conversations of grief and loss and a lot of hard things too?
Yeah, well, I tell you, I'm going to give John Green another shout out there, because that's just what floored me about The Fault in Our Stars, is how well he balanced that. I mean, as you're going into the book, so much of it is like laugh out loud funny and so dark at the same time. And I was literally thinking, how is he doing this? And I read the book several times, but I think in my case, I had that comedy training in my back pocket to fall back on. But at the same time, I was going through a very real life loss, which was that my mother had Alzheimer's and then eventually passed away while I was writing the book. And I found that writing can really serve as therapy. And I poured so much of what I was feeling, particularly into Margot, who's also lost her mother and her boyfriend. And then I could lighten up a little bit by writing Hank. And as for the balance, I think the device of alternating Margot and Hank chapters helps create that balance. But that said, I do think you wouldn't want either one of them to just be one thing. And I would like to think that Margot has a good sense of humor, and Hank definitely carries the pain of being a 17-year-old who's looking at his life in the rear view mirror and seeing his family grieve him. So yes, it is tricky to balance those things, and I did work hard on that. So
I love that. You do an excellent job. Before I jump to the second part of that question. Kimberly's asking where the original concept came from. You have these little pieces that you talk about. Was there something that inspired the concept originally?
I'm telling you, Kimberly, it's who knows where ideas come from, because I'm telling you, this image, just clear as can be, came to me of this young girl. And I remember it. It was as I was waking up one morning, of this teenage girl who I knew was doing detective work, and I knew she was in one of the prairie states. And it was fall, and she was looking for clues to a murder. And it's just, that came to my mind. And it's kind of a, where the hell did that come from moment. And yet there was something about it, and I liked her, and I don't know, inspiration, where does it come from? But I could see how she was dressed, and that she liked to shop at thrift stores. And as I said, it just kept coming back and back. And I thought, all right, I'm going to do this in some form or another. So I'm not sure where it came from, but I can talk about how I then shaped it. I mean, should we get into that?
Sure. I have a question that you can
Sure.
talk about shaping it. Candace asks, setting is one of my favorite elements. Did you have setting in mind when writing the screenplay, or did that emerge more when morphing into a manuscript? So maybe that can be part of how you developed it.
Setting is very important. And I will tell you something I probably shouldn't admit, but I have never actually been to Nebraska. And yet my grandmother was born there, so I feel a certain connection. I've spent a lot of time in the Midwest because both my parents are from Indiana. But I actually first thought about Kansas, and then I thought there's so much already about Kansas, I think, in literature and American lore, but not enough about Nebraska. And just the more I read about it, and I think I did kind of a piddling amount of research for the TV pilot, but then when I was going to write a book about it, and might be dealing with people who actually know Nebraska very well, you can't fudge it. So I did do a lot of research about historical Nebraska, present day Nebraska, and then where in Nebraska. Originally I thought, oh, the west of Nebraska looks very interesting, and it does. It's just a fascinating landscape. But then I realized, no, I think they're in the Northeast, closer to Omaha. And so really it was just research, and really feeling the confidence to then relay it back. So.
Thank you. So what I had talked to her about before is she has these cool side characters. So she has Hank and Margot and these really cool side characters. So I had asked about, oh, this is different. Is that what you were talking about going into, or?
Yeah.
Sorry.
We had an exchange earlier today, and you had just asked about sort of how you shape the characters and make them distinct.
Yes.
Thank you. Are we there?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. All right. This might be interesting for anyone who's starting to write fiction. I have a technique that I use that I find very helpful when I'm creating characters, is that the first thing I do is explore what each of them want, need, and fear. And that usually takes me to some very interesting and revealing places. And then once I have that, I explore how each character is in conflict with each other, which is kind of a long process because it's each one with each other. And that often gives me significant story development ideas. So I find that a very helpful process. as far as Margot and Hank go and why they're distinct, I will share that early on when I was writing the alternating chapters, I would actually read little snippets of the Hunger Games before I started writing a Margot chapter, and then read little snippets of The Fault in Our Stars before I wrote Hank chapters to kind of put myself in the right headspace. Kind of like I've heard that actors will listen to certain kinds of music to get them in the mood for a scene they're doing. And those, if you know those books, they're two very different headspaces, which I think is part of why Margot and Hank are so distinct. And again, I wanted that balance. I wanted to send the reader back and forth. And it's also a whodunit, and the two of them have two different ways of gathering information. So
I love that. You're delivering some really good technique ideas here.
Oh, good. I hope so.
Was there something surprising that you learned about either your story or yourself that you didn't know going into writing Lazarus?
Yes. So I have a very valuable cadre of writer friends. I'm very lucky in that way. And I'll name check them here. Arthur Scher, Terry Holtzman, and Tanya Ward Goodman. Hi, if you're on. And my husband, Johnny, also as well, who I can count on to point me in the right direction when I've gone astray. And indeed, when they read the first draft of the book of Lazarus, I think all of them pointed out to me very kindly that I had chosen the wrong murderer. Oh. And they were so right. And that was a big rewrite. I had to put the whole thing back up on blocks, and do a major rewrite, but the result was so much better. And as far as what I learned about myself, I think I would start by saying I was very intimidated by the idea of writing a book, even with my background in other kinds of writing. And the process of creating this book, there it is, took years of plugging away and learning the craft and rewriting and studying people who are very good at it. And now I have this book. And so I would just say to any writers out there who want to try this, don't let intimidation stop you. Just read everything you can in the form and the genre. First of all, write what you love to read. Don't try and write what's popular, because then it'll just be a copy. I believe in taking classes, and then just get yourself in the chair writing every day, So.
That is amazing. Great advice. So going along with that, I guess, can you tell us a little bit about your writing process?
Yeah. So for years now, I write for about 3 or 4 hours every weekday morning. And I am a hardcore outliner. I outline and then outline some more, from the big overstuffed macro down to the lean outline. And because I need to know, and then once I have that, I feel like that's truly half the battle, because then I know what chapter or scene, if I'm script writing, I'm going to be working on that day. And I kind of know the beats I want to hit. People ask me occasionally about writer's block, and I don't really have it anymore, but I did have it when I was in LA, when there was so much. In LA, if you're a TV writer, I don't know if this is still true, but hiring season was in the spring, and there was so much pressure to have a really good spec script ready to go around and that is what would get you a job or not get you a job. And I just felt that pressure and got writer's block for the first time. And I got some great advice from a friend once who said, just sit down and write badly for at least an hour. And I was like, well, okay, I can do that. I can sit and write badly. But it's a way of giving yourself permission to start instead of sitting there sweating like, it's not going to be good, you know? And if you allow yourself to start writing badly, after a while you're in the flow and it's probably not that bad anymore because you've allowed yourself to do it. So anyhow, that's my story about writer's block.
I love that. I love that. Darby asks what you're working on now. Do you still do a lot of script writing, or what are you working on now?
So I am the other main project I'm working on now that this is launched and out in the world, yay. Well, I am writing another YA novel, which I'm excited about, which is, it's historical fiction, but it's 1970s, so it's not that historical. I feel like it reads like contemporary, but anyhow. But then the other big project that I'm excited about is I am working in theater again right now in a wonderful way, in that I am a proud librettist member of the BMI Lehman Engel Musical Theater Workshop in New York. And that was another form I was curious about, was musicals. And the BMI Workshop is the place where a lot of the great ones are born, like maybe you've heard of A Chorus Line or The Book of Mormon or Beauty and the Beast, and that's just the tip. But anyhow, it's been a great place to develop a new craft, and I'm currently working on a musical called Who's Afraid of the Big Bad Book, which is adapted from the Lauren Child children's book of the same name.
Okay.
I have a wonderful collaborator, Jack Mitchell, who is my genius composer, co-lyricist. And so that's been really, really fun. And as for TV, I always have pilots going around, and so we'll see. We'll see. Tune in, and we'll see.
Amazing that you have so much going on. Do you have a background in music?
I do. I play guitar. My husband's a musician, and so.
It's not fair to have so many talents. But...
Well, I have one or two.
Oh, that's amazing. Molly asks, did your characters ever surprise you, like assert their will over your story plan?
Oh, wow. That's interesting. Who surprised me? Gosh. Wow, okay. I feel like I could sort of get deep into characters you might not know about because you haven't read the book yet. There's a character who appears very menacing at one point, it's not one of the big main characters. His name is Danny, and he appears very menacing. And I thought, okay, where does he work? And he essentially took me to his workplace. Like suddenly I just thought, okay, I'm traveling with Danny to his workplace. Where does he work? And I did feel, I mean, this is a little woo-woo, but I did kind of feel like the character showed me. And I was like, well, that makes sense. Thank you, Danny. So yeah, that is absolutely a thing. And if that's Molly, my sister, hi Molly.
That's a brilliant question, Molly. Donna asks, you've mentioned the current you've mentioned the current YA novels that inspired you. What novels, good or bad, from your own YA years came back to you as you researched and wrote Lazarus?
Oh, wow. When I myself was a young adult, gosh, I can remember as a young, as a kid, I pretty much lived in Narnia. You know, I was a big C.S. Lewis person. And then even going into as a young teen, I was still into fantasy and sci-fi and, you know, oh gosh, Bradbury, Asimov, Kurt Vonnegut, Doi. When we were first in lockdown, and here I'm going to roll back to the bookshelf. I'll be right back. And I was thinking about a book that I was obsessed with probably when I was probably more like 12 or 13, and it's called Elidor. And again, it's a fantasy element. It's about, I love the whole traveling between two worlds thing, which of course they do in Narnia. And I found a copy of this. It's not that easy to find. It's a British author, Alan Garner, and I reread it, I think in March, and it was just as wonderful as I remembered. And then when I researched it, one reviewer called it the anti-Narnia. And I thought, well, isn't that interesting? Because I love them both. And I think it's a little more hard-edged than Narnia. I seem to be remembering a little younger than young adult. I'll say this, I remember my favorite book of my early 20s was The Cider House Rules, and John Irving in general. You know, there's no cliches in John Irving. You know, he always surprises you. So that's what I can remember.
I love kind of back to you. I love how you talked about reading. I taught college writing, and that's what I would do is write a paragraph and then read like Catcher in the Rye or something with really good voice, and then rewrite the paragraph. It's amazing how much that does influence you. So it's interesting to see those choices.
Oh yeah,
because they all have strong voice. Perry asks, you have a teenage daughter in the YA age range. Did she and or her friends read Lazarus and give you notes? Was she helpful?
She is always helpful, but they did not read Lazarus and give me notes. And let me say this, my daughter has been an enormous help on this journey because, for one thing, she is my social media director. I would be lost without her. I think she kind of rolls her eyes and is stunned by the things I don't know that she knows. She does not love scary things, and she thinks maybe this might be a little scary for her, which I think is a good instinct and one that I respect. I would say maybe the last fifth of the book is scary, but I am respecting that, and I think her now that it's actually out, I think her friends are taking more of an interest. So we'll see about that. But I would say having a teenager in the house when I have been writing teenagers was certainly helpful because I sort of have the feel of the slang and the attitude and the stories from school. So yes.
You have your own character study right there in the house.
Exactly. Yes.
If you had one writing quirk, what would you say it is? Or a couple, or anything that you do that's...
I'm gonna hold it up.
Okay.
Can you see that?
Okay. Kiss.
You had asked me this earlier, and that was the one I could think of. I am a strange writer in that I am allergic to coffee. I can't, for whatever reason, my body cannot process anything with caffeine in it, and yet the exception, thank God, is Hershey's Special Dark Chocolate. And so I need a couple of these to get me going in my writing process. So I would say that's my primary quirk. Other than that, I don't know. Obsessive outlining, is that a quirk? Nothing else that quirky I can think of.
I think special dark kisses are a great quirk to have. So you kind of talked about what you're working on now. Has COVID changed? I think I wrote down the wrong question. Has COVID changed kind of the direction you're going, or has it given you more time or changed anything about your routine?
Well, let's see. So the new YA novel I'm writing, it's a story that I've wanted to get to for a long time, and I do think that this difficult time has given me the time to focus on it. So there is a gift in that. We are very lucky in my household in that both my husband and I work from home, and my heart goes out to those who don't have that luxury. I'm now driving my daughter to and from school 2 days a week, and that's the only routine change, and that is nothing compared to what so much people are going through. So many people are going through. And as far as my goals go, I don't know if this is a cliche, but I do believe it. I do think that people are going to want to see and read more uplifting content, both during and in the aftermath of this time, whether it's comedy or something that touches people's hearts in an authentic way. I think that is what readers and audiences are going to want. And I think maybe we're not going to need quite so much dystopia. I think we might take a little break from the dystopia since we see it outside our window. So yeah, yeah, listen, I think this time has changed all of us, but that's sort of what I see for my writing future. So
good answer. I like that. Lorraine asks, as you're working on developing character personalities and their unique traits, do you ever find it helpful to draw on what you know about people in your own life?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that last part? What was it?
So as you are working on developing character personalities and their unique traits, do you ever find it helpful to draw on what you know about people in your own life?
Do you know, I think there must just be a complex data bank in my head somewhere, because I'm not consciously saying, oh, I'm basing that guy on Frank. I'm not doing that specifically. Very occasionally in my writing, I know where I got a personality trait from. I know where it's lifted from. One thing I do, which may surprise some people in my life, is that when I need a name, because there's a lot of, ancillary characters that you have to come up with names for, and I will just use my friends' names. And I've always done this. I did this back when I was writing scripts, and my friends would be amused to hear their names on TV. So I'm still doing that, but not so much consciously drawing from people I know.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you ever use names for characters that they don't like and they're offended by them, or no?
If I have, they haven't told me.
Okay.
I guess maybe I try not to do that, not try to uh, name evil, rotten characters after my friends. So,
Probably a good practice.
yes.
So this kind of I have what I like to call a shotgun round because there's a
Oh,
lot
yeah.
of think is interesting about you, but this kind of draws. Darby was saying it's interesting to hear what authors' gateway books are, what kind of leads them into reading and writing. And you talked about wanting happier, more uplifting things than dystopian. So I would love to know what you're reading now and what you're excited about reading that isn't even connected to your writing.
Um, I'll tell you, I think I'm late to the party on this author, and I have another visual aid here. But I just read Frederick Bachman's book, Beartown, which just knocked me out. And I know a couple of years ago, everyone was reading A Man Called Ove, which he also wrote, which I haven't even read yet, but it's next. But this, I'm telling you, this just blew me away. He's such a good writer. He's Swedish, and you could almost, it's not specifically a YA novel, but many of the main characters are teenagers, so it kind of could be, but it's just kind of a book for everyone. And anyhow, big fan. So,
Love book recommendations.
yeah, for sure.
So is he your favorite author and book that you're kind of excited about right now, or are there others?
Right now, yeah. Oh gosh, when all this first started in March, I just needed good escapist stuff, and I was reading Ellen Hildebrand, who they call the goddess of beach reads.
Yeah.
And she lives in Nantucket, and she writes things set on Nantucket and Martha's Vineyard, and you just travel away and everything is okay. So and she's a very good storyteller. But I will admit that what I'm reading right now is John Cleese's autobiography,
Oh,
which is I think you might have to be my age to remember Monty Python. I don't know if young
no.
people. Oh no. But he was kind of, well, they were all the main people, but very funny man, and I am just sitting on my couch laughing out loud every night. It's his autobiography. It's called So Anyway, and it's so British and so funny. It's just delightful. And so reading a fair number of escapist things this year,
Yeah.
but my plan, as I turn back to my bookshelf for my next book, one that I've missed that I know everybody else has read is The Book Thief by Marcus Zusak, which I hear is fantastic. And here's a funny story. I read his other book called I Am the Messenger, and I just thought it was terrific. And I was like, gosh, this guy's a good writer. It's too bad no one's ever heard of him. And then I looked him up. Oh, he wrote The Book Thief. Yeah, I don't think he needs my help. So that's next on my list.
That's amazing. I love that book. I'm interested to hear what you think. Is that tied at all to your historical fiction that you're working on? Or is it a different? Oh, you're in the 1970s.
I'm in the 1970s. So yeah, no, I just want to read the best stuff that I can. I'm also just coming off of reading Carol Silverstein's book Cursed, which is a YA novel, which is just wonderful. It's also in first person and so well written and so much humor along with the pain. And I recommend that a lot, Cursed. So
she's a fabulous author, and she recommended Lazarus for those of you who didn't know. So
which I so appreciate.
Okay, favorite music at the moment.
Okay, Emma, I'm going to give a shameless plug here. So get ready. But it's true. My favorite music is my husband's music. He's singer-songwriter Johnny Woods, and especially I would say my favorite song of all is his song Deeper, which he wrote for me while we were dating. And you can find Johnny Wood's music on all the music platforms you listen to. You just ask for Johnny Wood's Broken Fences, which was his first album. And you can discover all his wonderful songs. And it's kind of, the style is kind of Americana, which is a style that I particularly enjoy listening to. So,
Okay, I'm definitely gonna look.
shout out.
I love that. That's amazing. You must have a super creative household all the time.
There's a lot of creativity here. There really is.
Any television shows you're excited about right now that you're watching?
So we have, like many families, we have been binging together. It passes the time, and it counts as family time. And so we've been trying to find shows that two adults and she just turned 14. It was 13 for most of the year-old could enjoy together. And my husband and I rewatched a show we love with her, which was Friday Night Lights, which I just think is a fantastic show, and also Parenthood by the same creator. I have a soft spot for the Gilmore Girls, and I will say that the TV show Breaking Bad, I think, is the only TV show I've ever seen, again, in my humble opinion, all 5 seasons, there's not one bad episode. Not one. I think it's, it's the unicorn perfect TV show.
Okay. I started watching it, and that was one that got too heavy for me at that point in time. So
I understand. Maybe not one to watch now. Yes.
But I will finish
Gilmore
it.
Girls.
There you go. There's something light and fun.
Yeah.
Awesome. Those are great recommendations. Favorite movies recently?
Favorite movies recently?
Or of all time, either way.
Yes, I can certainly dig back. I would say my favorite drama of all time is To Kill a Mockingbird, also one of my favorite books. Favorite comedy of all time is probably Raising Arizona. I love the Coen brothers, and my friends and I still quote that movie. But, my daughter, again, will understandshe be like, can we listen to something or watch something from this century? And she has turned us on to wonderful things. And recently we watched a comedy called Always Be My Maybe, which was really good, really well written. So I recommend that one. Yeah.
Okay. Carrie asks, have you watched Mrs. Maisel?
I have tried Mrs. Maisel and I have liked it, and I've always meant to sit down and actually watch it because I know it's the same creator, Amy Sherman Palladino, as the Gilmore Girls. But I know I'm going to sit down and binge it all at some point, but I haven't done it yet. But I know I hear it's wonderful. So.
Well, Kathy says, hi, cousin.
Yay, cousin Kathy.
Terry is saying how wonderful your husband is as a singer and songwriter.
Hey, Terry, one of my best friends.
Oh, that's fun. It's fun to have a supportive
and
friend.
A wonderful writer also.
Very good. Well, I don't want to keep you too long, Maryanne. Is there anything else you want to share with readers?
Oh my gosh. I'm actually looking at my cheat sheets right now. Gosh, I don't think so. I guess I would just say, because I know you have a lot of young fans at Owl Hollow, I guess I'm going to get serious for a minute and say, just hang in there, everybody. Things are going to get better. They just will. So, anyhow.
Excellent way to end it. And I feel like your book personifies that. It has such an ending full of hope, and it ideally Hank would come back to life, but if not, it's the next best ending. So I think you're an excellent writer, and you're great at expressing emotion, and I think a lot of teens will resonate with what you've written.
Awesome.
So
thank you.
People pick up Lazarus. It's a beautiful book, and you won't be disappointed. I also wanted to mention that we're doing Letters to the Editor as our Book of the Month Club this month. So it's 99 cents right now. And if you like mysteries like Maryanne has written, it's another good mystery. It's an adult one, but also a good one. So
cool.
Check it out for 99 cents. And Maryanne, thank you so much for being here. You're amazing. And I always love a sneak peek at your life and how you seem to have covered all the fun writing careers. So that's super impressive. Where can people find you? Where should they look for you and follow you and learn from you?
So my author page is, it's Maryanne Malone Woods, but it's at Maryanne M. Wait, hold on. At Maryanne M. Woods, and that is also my Instagram handle. So.
And she's been posting fun Lazarus photos on Instagram, so go check them out.
Yes, my daughter has. Yes.
Oh, your social media manager.
Yes.
Well, thank you all for being here tonight. Hopefully you learned as much as I did. I can't wait to rewatch this one and take some notes, because you have a lot of great tools and advice. So thank you so much, Maryanne.
Thank you, Emma.
Thank you all for being here. Have a great night.
Subscribe to our channel so you'll never miss an upload, or join us live every Thursday for author interviews, book clubs, writing advice, and more on Facebook at Owl Hollow Press, 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific. See you Thursday.